It was a warm spring afternoon in 1986 when 14-year-old Emily Carson left her home in rural Indiana to visit a friend just a few blocks away. She rode off on her bike like she had 100 times before, wearing her favorite denim jacket and a pink ribbon in her hair. But this time, she never came back. Her disappearance shook the small town to its core. For weeks, volunteers searched fields, lakes, and back roads. Flyers were posted everywhere. Her parents, especially her father Tom, never gave up hope even. As years passed with no answers, no clues, no closure, life moved on around them, but Tom remained frozen in that day, haunted by the unknown. Then, 2 decades later, something unexpected happened. While browsing through a dusty corner of a junk shop in a nearby town, Tom picked up an old, weathered music box that looked oddly familiar. When he opened it, a faded photo slipped out and that one image sent chills down his spine. The face staring back at him was Emily. Older, different, but definitely her. The question was, how did it end up here? And who put it there? That discovery would unravel a string of hidden truths, forgotten places, and people who had been keeping secrets for far too long. What Tom uncovered next would lead him down a path no father should ever have to walk, and what he found would change everything. But the biggest shock was still to come. Tom couldn't stop staring at the photo. It was clearly Emily older, maybe in her early 20s, but unmistakably her. The way her smile curved slightly to the left, the dimple. Only she had it hit him like a wave. The photo was tucked behind the gears of the music box, like someone had hidden it there on purpose. He asked the shop owner about where it came from, but the man just shrugged. A woman dropped off a bunch of old stuff last month. Leave a name. That was all Tom needed to hear. Something about the whole thing felt off, like it was meant to be found meant for him. He took the box home and showed it to his wife. Lisa, she gasped the moment she saw the photo. The pain never fully left her face, even after all those years, but now it was mixed with confusion and fragile hope. Tom began digging through old files, newspaper clippings, and police records from 1986. He even called the old detective who had worked the case. But everyone had long since given up. Everyone except Tom. He started retracing Emily's steps from that day. The park she always cut through, the gas station she sometimes stopped at, even the old train tracks that ran behind town. But nothing new turned up. Still, something about that music box gnawed at him. It wasn't just the photo, it was the tune. He was sure he'd heard it before, but not in 1986. Much later, and not at home. Tom couldn't shake the tune from his head. It played on repeat in his mind, each note pulling him deeper into the past. Then it hit him. 2 years ago, while helping a friend renovate an old house on the edge of town, he heard the exact same melody coming from a similar music box abandoned in a sealed crawlspace. Back then, he hadn't thought much of it. Now, he was starting to wonder if that house had more to do with Emily's disappearance than anyone realized. The deeper he dug, the stranger things became. Lisa remembered something odd, to a letter they'd received a year after Emily vanished. It had no return address, just a simple typed message. She's safe. Let it go. The police had dismissed it as a cruel prank, but now, with the photo and music box resurfacing, it didn't feel random anymore. Meanwhile, across town, a local librarian named Claire was sorting through old donation boxes when she came across a journal belonging to a woman named Margaret Holloway. Flipping through the pages, Claire noticed entries dated around 1986. One in particular mentioned a girl hiding in her shed during a thunderstorm, frightened, confused, and refusing to give her name. Claire remembered the missing girl story. From years ago, her hands shook as she dialed the number printed on the old flyer. Back at home, Tom was staring at the photo again. Emily was smiling. But behind her, barely visible in the corner, was someone else. And he wasn't smiling. Tom couldn't stop staring at the corner of the photo. The figure was blurred, almost like a shadow, but the shape was unmistakably human. It chilled him to the bone. He showed it to Lisa, and she gasped. "That man," she whispered, "he looks like Mr. Carver. He used to run the junk shop back in the 80s. Tom's heart dropped. Mr. Carver had always seemed off to him, quiet, secretive, and overly curious about neighborhood kids. No one had thought much of it back then. He'd moved away years ago after the shop suddenly shut down. Meanwhile, Claire dug deeper into Margaret Holloway's journal. One entry mentioned the man who promised protection and how she'd let him use her shed for a night or two. She hadn't written his name, but the description, thin, tall, patchy beard, matched Mr. Carver. Claire's hands trembled as she turned the final pages. The last entry ended abruptly. "She begged me not to let him take her." Tom and Lisa drove across town that same evening, heading for the old junk shop building. It had been abandoned for years, windows boarded and roofs sagging. But the side door, to their surprise, was unlocked. Inside, everything was coated in dust and cobwebs. In the back room, Lisa froze. There was the same music box identical to the one in the photo. And on the wall above it, someone had scratched into the wood. Asterisk, she was here. Asterisk, suddenly, they heard a noise behind them. Floorboards creaked. They weren't alone. Lisa instinctively grabbed Tom's arm as they turned toward the sound. The creaking continued, slow and deliberate, coming from the hallway just behind them. Tom whispered, "We're not alone," and reached into his coat pocket, gripping the small flashlight he always carried. He flicked it on, casting a narrow beam of light across the dust-laden hallway. A silhouette moved just out of sight. Lisa's breath caught as she noticed something else. On the floor near the door was a rusted keychain shaped like a small bike. It looked eerily similar to the one her sister had owned in 1986. Tom bent down to pick it up, and as he turned it over, 3 initials were engraved on the back. EMR Elizabeth Marie. His voice broke slightly. That's her full name. They hadn't spoken it out loud in years. Before they could process what it meant, the sound of a latch clicking echoed from the front of the building. The door had closed. Someone or something had locked them inside. Suddenly, a dim light flickered on above them. It wasn't electricity. It was a lantern hanging from a nail in the ceiling, freshly lit. Someone had been there recently. Keena scanned the room again, now noticing a stack of old videotapes shoved under a broken table. Most were unlabeled, but one had faint handwriting. June 1986. A chill ran through both of them. This wasn't just an old building with secrets. Someone had left behind pieces of the truth, and someone else clearly didn't want it found. Tom carefully slid the tape into the old VCR they'd found behind a pile of boxes. As it whirred to life, the screen flickered. At first, just static. Then a shaky image appeared, a girl, around 14, riding a familiar red bike down a quiet suburban street. Lisa's hand flew to her mouth. "That's her. That's Beth." Her voice cracked. The date in the corner read June 14th, 1986, the day she vanished. The video cut to a dimly lit basement. Beth was sitting in a chair, scared but unharmed. A man's voice spoke gently from behind the camera. "You'll be safe here until we figure things out." Then it abruptly ended. Lisa and Tom were frozen. It wasn't a kidnapping in the way they'd feared all these years. Beth hadn't been taken by force. She'd run. But from what? That question still hung heavy. Tom began rifling through more boxes while Lisa explored the hallway again, driven by the need for answers. That's when she found a small locked drawer in the back of a rotted cabinet. With trembling hands, she pried it open. Inside was a weathered envelope addressed to Dad. Lisa recognized her sister's handwriting instantly. She pulled out the letter, and as she read, tears welled in her eyes. Beth had fled an abusive situation no one had known about, not from their parents, but someone trusted by the family. The man in the video had helped her disappear. But then, one final page slipped from the envelope. It was a photo of Beth alive. Standing in front of a coffee shop, dated just last year, Tom and Lisa stared at the photograph in stunned silence. The image wasn't blurry or aged. It was crisp, clear, and recent. Beth had survived. She was out there. Alive, older, but unmistakably her. The coffee shop in the background had a sign with a name partially visible. Tom, now shaking with emotion, quickly searched it online. It was a small cafe located in a quiet coastal town nearly 800 miles away. A week later, they arrived in that town, heartbeats racing as they approached the cafe. Lisa spotted her first. Beth was behind the counter, wiping a table, unaware that her past had just walked through the door. When she finally looked up and locked eyes with them, she froze. For a moment, time stood still. Then, tears spilled down her cheeks as she rushed into their arms. The reunion was emotional, quiet, full of tears and held back words. Beth explained everything: how she'd trusted the man who helped her escape, how he had passed away a few years ago, and how she had built a quiet life, always wondering if her family had ever understood why she left. Now they did.